our continued thanks to Carol Gay for making this possible each month on the fourth Sunday at 8:45. Carol, thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay, and good morning to all of you. And thanks to all of you for being here at 8:45, which is earlier than we used to have Credo. And it's up in the air of when and if we'll change that back. We'll just see what happens. Just as most things in the world right now are up in the air, aren't they? Today, I'm very happy to introduce our speaker, Dick Kistler. He's been a member at the UUCC for 13 years, and he's done a lot of volunteer work for us. He just finished a 10-year term as a volunteer on our building and grounds team. And next, he's going to serve on our worship team. And he's also volunteered for many years with our work that we do at the Charlotte Pride Festival. So today he will speak for about 20 minutes or less, and then we'll have about 10 minutes or so to ask questions. Those of you who are familiar with this, and I think that's most of you, know to write your questions down where the chat icon comes up, and while he's speaking or after he finishes. Please make your questions short and clear, and be sure they're in the form of a question. After he concludes, I'll read the questions to Dick, and he will respond for approximately 10 minutes. So I'll turn things over to you, Dick, and welcome.
So once in a blue moon, I've done Credo. The last time I did it, Richard Kuzmal was in charge of it, so it was quite a while ago. I'm going to say up front that my personal philosophy could most likely be described as secular humanism. I'm an agnostic, and that I'm willing to listen to evidence that there is a separate God, but no argument is so far convincing to me. And I don't expect that I'll ever change in that respect. Normally, I don't actually worry about that at all. Now, I think that life is a journey, and that a person's quest for a way to live is also a journey. So what I'll be talking about today is sort of a snapshot of my current, the state of the journey. And if I give the talk again tomorrow, it might be completely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about my global history, and then I'll talk about the religious history I've had, which is fairly minimal. And the last thing I'll talk about are some of the items that, religious items that resonate with me. So I grew up in Charlotte, strangely enough. I grew up mainly on 28th Street. It was called Moretz Avenue then. And near the intersection of Harris Boulevard and Almar Road. Now, if I had gone to high school while I lived on 28th Street, I would have gone to Harding High School. But in 1958, we moved to this other place over by Harris Boulevard and Almar Road. Now, in 1957, what happened? Dorothy Counts tried to get into Harding High School. Now, the stated reason for us moving to Harris Boulevard and Almar Road was to be close to where my mother worked, because she was starting to teach again after my brother got old enough to start school. But an ulterior motive was to avoid any any upsets that would happen in my education in high school caused by school integration. So I went to East Mecklenburg High School. East Mecklenburg High School was totally segregated during that time. I graduated in 1965. I went to North Carolina State University, and it was largely white at the time. There were a few Black students, and there was exactly one Black student in chemical engineering, the area that I studied in. Interestingly enough, he eventually wound up being a professor there. I went to NC State, studied chemical engineering in undergraduate and graduate school. I took a job in Houston, studying in research, studying coal liquefaction and coal gasification, which seemed to be the hot item in the early 70s when I started work, but it certainly appears that now it's never going to happen, and rightfully so. After I had worked there, I eventually wound up returning to Charlotte to take care of my mom, who had Alzheimer's. An interesting item that happened while I was taking care of my mom was that for about a 6-year period, I was able to read about a book a week. And these books were, you know, some of them bestsellers, a few of them, but most of them were either philosophy text or college textbooks, other kinds of college textbooks. During that time, I was a member of 3 book discussion groups: a great books group, a classical books group, and a philosophy and religion group. So in engineering at NC State, they made sure that I was self-conscious about not knowing anything about the liberal arts. So this 6-year period was a time that I took to remedy that. After my mom died, I worked a year at a yearbook publishing place, Hearst Jones, that closed in 2012. And I've been retired more or less since then, so it's going on 9 years. I met Vivian Brenner in 2004. We married in 2008, and she retired in 2017. Currently I've participated in another great books club or reading group for the last 11 and a half years. This group is a little different in that it doesn't specifically aim at reading the great books of the Western world. It does some of that, but it also reads woman authors, minority authors, and even some great books of the Eastern world. Now, my religious journey. I originally started out as a kid at Gillespie Methodist Church, which is over in that area around 28th Street, or it used to be. It is no longer. Then after we moved over on the east side of town, I went to Cokesbury Methodist Church for a few years, and then Hickory Grove Methodist Church until I graduated from high school. I began to have doubts about the Christian religion while I went to Gillespie Church, so that would have had to have been before I was 10 years old. So that's kind of interesting. When I was at Hickory Grove, I was active in the Methodist Youth Fellowship and was president one year, which is not significant except for the fact that it meant that I was on the official board of the church. So I got to see how how churches were run and the power of the minister. Now, after I graduated from high school, I didn't attend church regularly during college. I did attend Pullen Baptist Church for a while because W.W. Fenlater, who was the minister then, was very opposed to the Vietnam War. Okay. And then after I graduated, I didn't concern myself with religious things. I made friends at work, and I worked. The job that I was at might require 65 to 85 hours a week of work. So that's what I did. Now, after I moved back to Charlotte, and after my mom died, and I met Vivian, we began to look for someone to marry us. And the first place that we came to look was at the UU Church. And of course, at that time, Jay, you weren't marrying people because of gay marriage, because of the lack of gay marriage. But Doug Reisner married us. But we liked the church so much that we just stayed. The things that we liked were the community, first of all. And Jay's sermons were more intellectually stimulating than anything that I think I had ever done, or at least since college. Also, the list of UU principles, the 7 principles, was attractive. And the UU's view, the view that each person can and does construct their own worldview. Actually, I think probably pretty much everybody does that anyhow. So there's no long story about the tortuous path that I took to come to be a Unitarian Universalist. There was no religion that wronged me or us. And my family would not care one way or the other what church I attended. Okay, finally, I want to talk about some things that resonate with me. And these are a non-inclusive list of things that have occurred to me while I was preparing this. My current view is that humankind has no philosophies that can be always applied with efficiency and particularly with compassion. And so it's best to look at problems that we have, either the ones I have in my life or globally, the ones that our city, state, country has, through different lenses to determine what our approach might be. And this includes religion, in addition to other philosophies. Of course, philosophy gives many different approaches. For instance, utilitarianism, territorial imperative, pragmatism. And I think pragmatism is particularly important, that we have to apply the filter of what we have done, what happened when we did it, and is that what we want? I think one of the problems that Congress has, for instance, is that they don't apply those last 2 things. Because most difficult problems in human existence probably are going to take some iteration to solve, if they're solvable at all. I feel that religion is an intentional effort to engage with the intrinsic, insolvable, ineffable, paradoxes in human experience. And that should sound familiar because it came from a course that Jay taught a number of years ago about religion. And a definition of religion that's this broad can clearly include non-deist religions such as Buddhism, and it might even reach as far as libertarians' belief in the efficacy of capitalism. The next thing is that religious ideas are paradoxical. If an idea doesn't have any paradoxical elements, it's probably not a religious idea. And a notable fact is that emotions are sort of like that also. And I believe that any philosophy of life that doesn't take into account emotions is bound to failure in the long run. So emotions are contradictory and paradoxical. And so religion brings an approach that includes emotion and includes personal experience in its worldview. And also it gives an entry for compassion, which other philosophies are not strong on. Now, to try to use our second principle, I volunteer at Roof Above in the front desk. If we hadn't had the pandemic quarantine, it would be 10 years that I volunteered there. And for the last couple of years before the pandemic, I taught a class in legal information for people who are being evicted in crisis assistance ministries. And I plan on starting that back up whenever crisis starts letting groups of people in the door again. I began all of this after I retired. And the reason I did was that once upon a time, the UUCC took on homelessness or the ending of homelessness as a problem for the congregation. And I believe it's a very long-term problem. It is actually showing, at least in Charlotte, some hope of being improved. I also try to be involved in appropriate demonstrations as time goes on. Moral Mondays and the Poor People's Campaign are two that I like, but I'll be happy to demonstrate on other things too. And then lastly, I try to be involved in local elections because that's where I actually can make a direct difference. In Matthews, we've been fairly successful in improving the town government. And I believe that this is the way that we work for transitional change in the world. The Republicans did this and beginning 40 or 50 years ago. And I think that Democrats will also have to do this to make permanent transitional change. Because the choice of a presidential candidate can sometimes be a vehicle for change, but generally they need support from Congress and from elsewhere to make significant change. And don't get me started on the General Assembly. So that's pretty much what I had to say. So I'll entertain questions. I already have, it appears, 4 or 5 questions.
Okay, thank you, Dick, so much. Let's see. I'm going to start with, what has been your experience with racial diversity in your journey?
Well, I already mentioned part of that, in that my parents avoided the upheaval at Harding High School. Today, my parents probably would be regarded as racist. They didn't actually go out and hang anybody, but they were very afraid of the things that Martin Luther King advocated. And they were afraid at what would happen in our neighborhood if Blacks moved in. So that was one of the things in high school and college that I was most concerned about changing, among other things. I made friends with the one chemical engineer. Later on, I lived with a group of people that included Black people. And I've been very concerned my entire life about how I interact with Black people. It's always been a problem in the sense that I have to think about what I'm doing. Perhaps people that are younger than I am are able to treat Black people and white people, you know, as all as people, but because of my upbringing, I always have to think about that.
Okay, here's another question. What's the last book you read that you would recommend?
Okay, a book that I read is a science fiction book because I enjoy reading science fiction. And it's written by a guy named Kim Stanley Robinson, who, while he's not a scientist, he writes hard science fiction and he well researches it. The book is titled The Ministry of the Future. Kim Stanley Robinson has taken on as a subject climate change, and his interest is whether or not the current political structure can actually do anything about it. And the Ministry for the Future is his opinion about what the best solution that we have now, given our political structure. One of the things that it starts out with is a heat wave in India that kills 20 million people. And the Ministry of the Future is created by the Paris Accord signees to deal with climate change in the future. And the book goes on to show what they do. In the end, I'll give away the ending. The human race actually does begin to make some headway against climate change, but his opinions about where the problems will be and how they'll be solved is very interesting.
Okay. Wait a minute. Here's one. As a native Charlottean, how have you seen the religious landscape or community of the city evolve? And in the past, it's been the home of some mega churches and televangelists.
One of the things that's been characteristic of Charlotte, and that's noticeable when you move anywhere else is that there are a lot of churches in Charlotte. I can remember driving along Ottawa Road between Highway 51 and Harris Boulevard, and noticing that there were 17 churches in that stretch of road. So my opinion is, and observation from living in Houston, is that instead of the churches being in Charlotte being large, the churches in Charlotte are actually small. When you go to Houston, the churches there are large compared with the ones here. So, so that's the difference that I would say I've noticed.
Okay, here's another book question. What book or books have had the most impact on your life?
Oh, there are a few. Most of them came out of my reading in the 90s, the 6 years that I talked about. Plato and Aristotle would rank way up there. The Bhagavad Gita would rank way up there. Siddhartha would rank way up there.
Okay, let's see if we have time for one more. Okay, did you ever encourage someone to be a secular humanist?
One of the problems that I see with Christianity is the fact that it's a proselytizing religion. So while I would be, happy to help if someone asked about secular humanism, if someone asked me, I would be happy to help them. I'm not gonna go out and recruit people on the street to be secular humanists.
Okay, and I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Dick. This has been very stimulating. I've been taking notes. You've been giving us a whole lot to think about, and I think several of us will want to go back and watch your video of this again. So we really appreciate you taking the time to take the time to prepare this and present it for us today. So to all the rest, everybody else, stay tuned next month. It'll be the 4th Sunday. We'll let you know the time ahead of time. Hope we do a better job of that in September. And our speaker then will be Jared Brown. So thanks to all of you who attended, and thanks again, Dick.
Thank you.
Bye.